Whenever debate night comes to Glasgow, we get questions about the state of the place. Scotland's biggest city has struggled to recover from the impact of the pandemic, with footfall down and shops and offices left empty. It's home to some of Scotland's worst deprivation and health problems, but Glasgow also has been named the UK's friendliest city, and it's packed with potential. So tonight we're devoting the whole programme to the challenges and the opportunities here, and people from all over Glasgow have joined us to share their views. Welcome to Debate Night. Debate Night is the show where the people get to ask the big questions. Answering them this evening, a panel of passionate Glaswegians. Susan Aitken is the SNP leader of Glasgow City Council. Susan was elected as a councillor in Langside, where she continues to live. She says that talk of Glasgow's decline is absolutely false, and she believes the city is going through a period of change that will leave it stronger. Lord Willie Haughey is a Labour Party donor and entrepreneur. Willie grew up in the Gorbals, left school with no qualifications, but went on to become one of Scotland's most successful businessmen. He's put more than £20 million of his own money into restoration projects across the city, including at Hampden Park, and has launched his own plan to tackle Glasgow's housing emergency. David Eustace is an internationally acclaimed photographer and artist. David grew up in Glasgow's East End and served in the Navy before becoming a prison officer at Barlinnie. He started photography as a hobby, but has since travelled the world, shooting with some of the biggest names in fashion for Vogue, GQ and Tatler. He says, if I was ever in trouble, I'd want a Glaswegian by my side. Annie Wells is the Scottish Conservative MSP for Glasgow. Annie continues to live in the same house she grew up in Springburn. She's been outspoken on the challenges faced by Glasgow, in particular around drugs. And finally, Paul Sweeney is a Scottish Labour MSP for Glasgow. Before politics, Paul worked in the Govan shipyards. He's passionate about saving Glasgow's heritage and believes the city faces a war of attrition when it comes to preserving architecture and landscape. Please welcome them all to Debate Night. And welcome to our studio audience here in Glasgow in the city centre. It's great to be back with you, and you can join in the discussion from home, wherever you happen to be this evening. BBCDN is the hashtag you need on social media, and our Debate Night podcast of the show will be available for you to download straight after this broadcast. So tonight is all about one subject: Scotland's biggest city and the challenges and opportunities it faces. They say people make Glasgow. We've got people from all over Glasgow here with us tonight. So this is a special programme. If I was to ask you what makes Glasgow special for you, what would you say? The man with the glasses in the second row. Yeah.
I think it's the people. The people in Glasgow. You can go anywhere in the world, you'll find a Glaswegian, and they're well received. No matter where you go.
Thank you. And just behind you, man with the glasses. Yeah.
I think what makes Glasgow is a sense of community, because no matter what happens to us, we're such a resilient people and we always come together in hardship.
Thank you. Man with the beard, right in the middle at the back.
For me, a few things make Glasgow. It's the UNESCO City of Music. We get more concerts than most European cities. Our restaurant scene is incredible. And we've got two of the greatest sporting institutions in Europe here, and both should be celebrated, even the baddies.
No mention of Partick Thistle here this evening. Right, we're off to a flying start, and a positive start as well. David Eustace, born here, raised here, but you've lived and travelled the world. How do you feel when you come back here?
I feel comfortable pretty much wherever I go, to be honest with you. I love Glasgow dearly. I think, to answer that initial question, I think if I was to sum up Glasgow, it'd be two words. It'd be contradiction and it'd be hope. And I think Glasgow has an energy that's found in other past industrial cities I've lived in, like New York and places like that. You know, it's got a can-do attitude, but more so when people tell it can't do, then Glasgow embraces it can do. And I like that, you know. So I feel very comfortable coming back. I feel comfortable in most cities that I lived in, you know.
For you, Paul, for you, from a positive point of view, what makes Glasgow for you? What makes Glasgow special?
I just think the resilience of its people. It's a city that's had a lot of knocks over the last 100 years, but it's, despite that, one of the greatest cities in the world, I think we all agree. And it's so much going for it, and I think we're all eager to work together as best we can to try and realise the full potential of our great city and take that message around the world. You know, 100 years ago, Glasgow was one of the top 20 cities in the world in terms of population. It might have had a decline in terms of the people living in it and some of the issues around the social problems of deindustrialisation, but nonetheless, the people in the community and the sense of resilience that it's had is always something, it's true strength.
Susan.
Yeah, what others have said, people and the energy that the people of Glasgow bring. Glasgow has an energy like no other city, and that includes some of the greatest cities in the world, like New York, which have their own energy. But there is something about Glasgow, the combination of our history, what people have been through, but how they've emerged from that. People in Glasgow do, underneath it all, remain relentlessly optimistic. They really have passion and pride about this city. There's such a strong sense of place in everyone in Glasgow. It's not, you don't live in Glasgow. Glasgow inhabits you as well. It's a place that gets under your skin.
Okay. Willie Haughey, for you, what makes it special? Why do you choose to live here?
Well, I love it. I was born in the Gorbals here and I love it. But I don't think there's another city in the world that could have free strap lines like, you know, Glasgow smiles better, Glasgow the caring city, and people make Glasgow. That sums the city up for me perfectly. I remember when I worked in the Middle East in the 80s, and every time I came back home after being 6 weeks away, as soon as I drove onto the on-ramp in the M8, I felt proud. My chest would go out, and it was brilliant to be back. So this city means everything to me.
Annie Wells.
Yeah, virtually the same as what everybody else says, but I think Glaswegians do make Glasgow. I mean, I can't think of anywhere else in the world where you can walk down the street and somebody will just, hiya, how you doing? And it's just the humour we've got as well, I think, being Glaswegian. Sometimes we know that there's issues going on, but I think sometimes we can give it a wee bit of, come on, what you doing? Get yourself together, not get yourself together as such, but saying, right, come on, let's get behind this, let's do something. And we spoke about community and stuff like that. I think living in Glasgow for the last 50-odd years, I think we've lost a lot of the sense of community in our own communities in Glasgow. I look at Springburn, where I live. I don't see the community that was there in the 80s.
You mentioned issues. We're going to talk about those here this evening. It's good to start with that kind of positive mindset in all of this. But let's go to our first question of the night, which comes from Gordon Lyon. Gordon, good evening.
Good evening, panel. Is Glasgow a dear green place or an oh dear what a mess place? How can we rejuvenate the city when we all know that money's too tight to mention?
Thank you. We're going to try and get across health over the course of the next 60 minutes. We're going to look at the city centre and at crime as well. But let's just start with a kind of overview of the challenges that are faced here. Which is it for you, David Eustace? Dear green place still, or oh dear, what a mess?
I think it's a balance between both. I think everywhere moves on. Every city's suffering to a certain extent. You guys have mentioned the resilience this city has. So, you know, we got on with it, we picked ourselves up. So I think it's about both. I think there is elements within Glasgow. A lot of it is what you go looking for as well. And the one thing, driving in here today, you know, I passed certain things that this is not your city or my city, this is our city. And I think that's what we need to embrace again in Glasgow. When I drove in it, I noticed the new, just at past Provan Mill, they built the new Corton steel bridge across the motorway going up to Pinkston Drive. And it's already vandalised. That's our people who have done it. Council can't fix that. Council shouldn't need to fix that. So I think there's an element, yes, for me it's still very much a dear green place, but there's an element, oh dear, but it's up to us to fix it. We've got to take our own personal responsibility. I remember growing up, you know, my mother took every bit of pride. Every third Friday it was her turn to wash the clothes, and my wife done it in Partick as well. So we've got to take a part of our own responsibility. This is what we do. We're Glaswegians, we stand up to things. So those who look for excuses always find them, and I don't see any benefit to looking for excuses. Willie
Haughey, is he right? Is the issue, where's the pride gone?
I've got to be honest, I think lack of funds is at the heart of a lot of things. You know, the reason why I come on tonight was all about we're going to try and talk up Glasgow, and we're going to try and come up with good ideas, not to come and have a go at people. But I think, to be fair, when you look at the city centre at the moment, I think COVID, we've not really recovered from COVID, and we should. I told somebody in my office yesterday to take every sign down in the building at anything to do with COVID. And I think that what we have to do is that we have to come up with ways where we can draw the economy. This city has delivered some of the cleverest people that ever lived. the part that we played in the Industrial Revolution, the part that we played in the Enlightenment, our institutions, our universities have given us, I mean, Lord Kelvin, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for him and his work with refrigeration. So I think that what we have to do here is that we have to have more pride, and we have to say, you know, let's stop moaning about it, let's do something about it. Right, when I look at the city centres now, yeah, it could be cleaner, right? But I think, Susan would tell you, if they had the money, they would have bin guys out every day, right? But the problem that we've got at the moment, especially in the city centre, I think that we need to find some way of getting together so we can create the finance that the city would have the money to do all the things that we want to do.
Let's hear from people in the audience. Man in the second row. On you go.
Yeah. Glasgow is a great city, there's absolutely no doubt about that, and resilience, right, and the working class are second to none. But if you scratch the surface of Glasgow, in the communities, in the housing schemes, they're riddled with poverty and lack of facilities and resources. That is where the council need to come in, and the Labour Party, the government, need to come in and actually put money right into it to get these areas to rise again, to be the way you're talking there, to be proud of our city. We want to be proud, of course we do, right? But we're getting a lot of kickings here, left, right and centre, and it needs to be sorted.
Thank you, thank you. Susan Aitken, there's a lot of work going on in the city, all around where we are this evening. What's the plan? What's the vision?
So the plan is for the city centre, a city centre that matches up to the best of what we would see in cities in Europe, a city centre that is much more people-centred, that feels safe, that feels like a place where people can walk around and spend time, that's healthier, that is cleaner in terms of cleaner air, but also, yes, is cleaner on the streets as well. And folk are right to say, yeah, we have had some really significant challenges around funding, which has meant that public services have, certainly over the past 4 or 5 years, but really 15 years, struggled to keep pace with the scale of the challenge sometimes. I'm glad to say we have had an opportunity for the first time in a number of years. The council's had an opportunity in our budget this year to make the investments that we would have wanted to make. We've employed over 300 new frontline staff in cleansing and in parks, teams that will be in neighbourhoods all around the city, working in hotspots, really getting to know those communities and being based in those communities. The neighbourhood clean teams, deep clean teams that will deal with things like leaves and gutters and the graffiti, all that kind of thing.
Do you recognise the narrative that Glasgow's in decline?
No.
That it's a mess?
So I recognise absolutely that, exactly as I've been saying, we've had a period, particularly post-COVID, but as a direct consequence of 15 years of austerity and a reduction in funding for public services, where those public services, no matter how hard they've tried, haven't been able to keep up with the scale of the challenge. And the scale of the challenge in a city like Glasgow is massive. We've just made that really significant investment. We'll have, as I say, more than 300 new staff on the streets by the end of July.
So it's going to get better?
Yes, I'm confident that people will start to see that difference, not just in the city centre, but also in our
So if we did this programme again in a year's time, we came here in a year's time, you'd say there will be a difference. People would notice the difference in 12 months.
I'm confident people will start to see the difference pretty soon. Like I say, all of those folk they've been recruited, they'll be in their jobs by the end of July. And ready to get out on the streets. Right. But we're also, the kind of investment that's going into our city centre, we're going to see quite rapid transition over the next few years. It's the biggest transformation of Glasgow's city centre, probably since we pedestrianised Buchanan Street 40 years ago, the biggest change that people will have seen. And you're going to see that happening quite fast over the next few years. But I'm really conscious, and people have referred to this already, Glasgow's living with a legacy of the past 40 or 50 years.
I don't want to cut you off, Susan, but we will get into some of that over this. We've got an hour tonight for this. Gordon, who asked the question, has got his hand back up. Gordon.
Yes, I just feel that to a large degree we pay more but get less. It's all very well for the local councils to ramp up council tax. Mine went up 13%. But as soon as I'd paid my 13%, my bins are getting collected less often. I'm paying £50 for my green bin to be collected. I don't mind paying a bit more if I can see that I'm getting some value for money, but I don't see that.
Okay, Susan, I'll let you come back in on that. Yeah. Gentleman, second row, yes.
Hi there. We've got the opportunity next year with the Commonwealth Games coming to Glasgow. Great opportunity. The eyes will be in Glasgow, and we've got George Square closed off till November next year. What advert is that for Glasgow?
Okay. Yeah, I'll let you pick up on that too. One more. The lady with her hand up. Yes. On you go. Yeah.
I think it's obviously great that there's going to be investment in the city centre, but is there going to be investment in things like community spaces, public libraries, sports facilities, things like the People's Palace and the Queen's Park Glasshouse? They've all closed over the last 5-6 years. Where are people that are working class supposed to go to free, warm spaces when they are kind of shutting down all around us? And I understand those are expensive, but will there be investment in those areas as well, in the communities outside the city centre?
OK, Susan, do you want to come back on that? And the issue of George Square being closed,
yeah.
When the Commonwealth, the eyes of the world are on Glasgow.
No, absolutely. So I'm going to say your council tax didn't go up 13% in Glasgow. I need to make that absolutely clear. It was very much in single figures in Glasgow. Yeah, so we tried to keep it as low as we possibly could, but we did put it up a little bit above the 5%. Precisely so we could make the kind of investments that I'm talking about. On George Square, I think it's a really good question. So George Square has desperately needed that refurbishment. It was the victim of botched attempts in the past. I've been desperate to get in and do that refurbishment in George Square for 8 years now. In some ways, George Square has been a wee bit of a victim of our success as a city because we've hosted so many major events that it keeps like, oh, we're doing the cycling championships, we can't touch George Square yet. We're doing COP26, we can't touch George Square yet.
It's never a good time.
It's never a good time, so it has to happen sometime. Okay. And I was really clear that I'm really happy we're hosting the Commonwealth Games, but we couldn't do it at the expense of progress in the city centre.
Right, okay.
What it does do is give us the opportunity to actually showcase some other parts of the city which are being transformed. So I've got my team in the council looking at areas like the Brumallow, for example, where there's been a huge amount of development and real transformation.
So spreading the love out from the city centre.
Paul, using the opportunity to showcase
Sweeney,
other areas.
Back to the question, dear Green Place or oh dear, what a mess?
Well, Glasgow has got a lot of structural problems that go back, 70 years or more when the city massively depopulated. Glasgow is the most depopulated British city. It's lost 40% of its population over the last 70 years or so.
Slightly increasing now, though, isn't it?
It is increasing. It's been increasing since the turn of the century, which is really positive, but it isn't moving fast enough. It's not increasing at the same pace as, say, Manchester, which I think we should be really benchmarking ourselves against. The problem we've got is the tax base of the city. I don't envy our councillors in Glasgow because they're trying to manage all the amenities of a massive city region of 1.8 million people, but with a tax base that's just about a third of that. And actually, when you look at all the businesses in Glasgow that generate a lot of the economic activity, the rates that they generate, business rates that they generate, actually disproportionately are going out of the city to elsewhere in Scotland. So we're not getting our fair share of the tax base that the city's wealth is generating. And I think that's actually undermining a lot of our potential. So there's great things going for Glasgow. It's the heartbeat and the engine room of the Scottish economy. But I think we're hamstrung in many ways by the structure of local government, and we're not getting the full tax base. 80% of Glasgow's council funding comes from the central government in Edinburgh. And whilst we've seen an increase in the last year due to the new Labour government's increase in fiscal expenditure, which has flowed through the Scottish government into the local authorities in Scotland, we've had 10 years of disproportionate cuts to councils. So in Glasgow's case, we've had this order 7 times the cuts in Glasgow, with £1.5 billion taken out of the city's funding, which I think has fundamentally undermined it.
Okay. Annie Wells.
I think Glasgow is a dear green place, but I also think it is an absolute bit of a mess. When people come up to visit me, my brother comes up from London, maybe comes up twice a year, but he sees it declining every time he comes up. And I think I look out my window and I've got weeds growing out the pavement, I've got grass across the road that gets cut, it doesn't get lifted, you get fly tipping everywhere, and the amount of rats we're seeing about Glasgow as well. I mean, I don't know how many complaints there's been, but I love Glasgow. I am so passionate about Glasgow.
So what's the solution to all of that? We know what the problems are. What are the solutions?
I think we need to look more at looking at, I think we spoke about pride and community as well earlier, and I think we actually need to involve our communities in things as well to get the place to where we would all want it to be. I think we all want Glasgow to be...
people cleaning up their own communities?
I think people taking more of a pride in their own communities, community pride. I mean, I tried to get litter pickers and HV vests from one of the hubs that are about Glasgow to do litter picks. None of them had any. They all gave them out, they never had any back, so we couldn't do anything. I've went and bought some myself and bought high-vis vests, but I do think, I mean, you were talking about your mum doing the close. I think there's people out there who do want that pride, but if they don't see anything going on about them, they're not going to put the effort in to do that. They want to see Glasgow City Council taking the lead, but giving us the means to actually help bring the city back up to where it was, that you can walk through and you can go, that's a cracker, that is. But I can't do that at the minute in certain places.
Okay. Listening to this at home, watching at home this evening, your positivity around this, your ideas around this. We're looking for some solutions this evening for Glasgow. The hashtag is BBCDN on social media. Next week, we're going to be in Portobello in Edinburgh for our last show before the summer. Your last chance to come along and have your say. Go to the website, bbc.co.uk/debate night. Let's go to our second question of the night, which comes from Christina Biguzzi. Christina, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Homelessness is still a really big problem in Glasgow, with many people being unable to afford decent housing. What can be done to make sure everyone has a safe, affordable place to live?
Thank you, Christina. Housing emergency declared here in 2023. 3,500 children currently in temporary accommodation. Willie Haughey, you've got a plan to change housing in Glasgow. What is it?
Well, obviously what we're trying to do is to bring a complete new model to affordable housing. And you know, before we talk about housing, just to go back to the young lady's point here, what's happening at the moment is that people come onto these shows and they come on and say, let's tax the rich and take care of the poor, right? And it's easy to get a clap. The biggest problem that we've got in society at the moment is most of the people in this, it's the people in the middle band at the moment who are struggling for the first time in their lives. Right, there's people in here thinking about bills now they'll never thought about in their life. There's only one way out of this before we talk about housing, and that is to grow the economy. It's to get better jobs, to get more money into the city so we can pay for the services, right, that we need. People are right, we're paying more and getting less. But going back to housing now, what I would say is that...
Because housing's the key to everything, isn't it?
100%.
To move here, on Paul's point.
People forget that before the dot-com boom, housing was a barometer to how the country was doing. I'm talking about the UK and in Scotland. So for me, we've been working for 4 years to try and find an answer to the affordable housing problem. And we totally believe that we have, you know, been in talks with the Scottish Government, which has been very, very good. You know,
you met Kate Forbes about this at the weekend.
And Shirley Ann Sullivan. And I have to say, I was very encouraged that they do believe there is a crisis and they're working on it. And I was encouraged by that meeting. And we're hoping to work to do that. But what we're trying to do here is bring a solution for housing where it will bring people's cost in a month down from 50% of their income down to 25%. Living in nice houses, bringing people's energy down. And if, you've probably seen it in the BBC, it's been showed. And it's in Glasgow, the first house we've built is in Glasgow, behind our offices. But we are trying to deliver housing, we're trying to deliver housing where all the benefits that we create in housing, the benefit goes to the tenant.
Is that scalable, though?
100%. 100%. We're starting now looking at probably building another 1,800 over 3 or 4 sites, not all in Glasgow, but 100% that this model works. And I'll guarantee you that this will bring people's monthly cost down from 50% to 25% for the houses.
OK, this is a big issue for people in the audience. Man in the front row here.
You did mention something about building an economy, because most times for post-industrial cities like Glasgow and Manchester. So what I want to ask is, for people in the government, what are the plans for the young people to go into this kind of, to develop their skills? You know, to build an economy, like in a country like this, you need people actually doing things with their hands, people innovating, people developing new ways to do things, you know? Like in the US, most of the big tech companies is actually the richest, the most innovative companies are in the US and some in China. But in the UK, we don't see those numbers coming out. Okay. And it's the new millennium, the way things are going.
Glasgow actually does well for innovation, but I want to stick with housing just now because we haven't answered that question yet. Man with the glasses and the grey top, yes.
What I don't understand about housing is we're throwing students' blocks up all over the city, and we have been for years. How is it easy enough to build blocks for students but not build houses? I walked up from Buchanan Street today and I counted 13 people out begging, and I saw 4 places where people were obviously sleeping in shop windows. We can throw up students' block, no bother, but we're not building houses, and I don't understand that.
Susan Aitken?
So we do face actually a homelessness emergency in Glasgow, which there's a whole number of complex reasons behind that. Housing supply is one of them. We actually have the most successful affordable house building programme in Glasgow in these islands. We build more homes for social rent as the Glasgow City Council is the housing authority in partnership with community-led housing associations than any other local authority in the UK.
What that man is seeing, Susan, is student housing being thrown up everywhere.
And you're absolutely right. For private developers, they find it easier to build student housing just now. They get the funding for that. I would argue student housing is also housing, and students also need somewhere to live. When we're talking about growing the city's population, and the city centre population is actually growing beyond our targets, one of the reasons why Glasgow's population is growing is because we've got one of the highest graduate retention rates in the UK. So young people come to Glasgow to study and they stay here. About half of them stay here. That's much higher than most other places. I think only Bristol's ahead of us. So it's important that we're building homes for everyone. But yeah, we have seen homelessness, people living in unsuitable or temporary accommodation, go up by about 1,000 over the past year, and that is a huge challenge.
Do you know why that is?
So the biggest driver of it, and our evidence shows us this, what you might call the kind of domestic population, people in temporary accommodation in our local population has actually gone down slightly. The biggest increase has been, and it's a 4-fold increase in homelessness among refugees, because the previous UK government made a change to their approach to the way that they process asylum applications. So what happens is when someone gets a decision that they can stay in the United Kingdom, what then happens is actually they're made homeless. So it's a really poor system.
You've talked about putting a pause on the Home Office sending asylum seekers to Glasgow until you sort the situation out. Do you want to see that?
We're very reluctant to do that. We're the biggest asylum dispersal authority in the UK. We're really proud of that, of Glasgow's history. And I need to be very, very clear, it is not asylum seekers and refugees who are causing this problem. It is this change in policy which the previous government put in place, which the current government is continuing, and it's not funded. So we are spending actually tens of millions of pounds as the council to get people with roofs over their head. A couple of years ago, we'd reduced rough sleeping in Glasgow to single figures. Now, we want it to be zero, but compared to other cities, I mean, it was actually an amazing achievement. We've seen it go back up into double figures again. It's round about between 20 and 30 on any evening in the city centre. And we want that to end. We want to get it right back down again to where we were. That's driven by a cost of living crisis. And we can't ignore the fact that homelessness is directly related to austerity, the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, there's a difference between homelessness and rough sleeping as
well.
Indeed,
yes, absolutely. And there's also a difference between begging and rough sleeping.
Yeah,
I think
I'll come back to lady in the front row.
Yeah, when I was coming up here tonight, looking at all the beautiful buildings that we have in Glasgow, an awful lot of them are lying empty. Yes. There's a lot of them with the windows all smashed. And I just think all these buildings that are beautiful buildings, they're just lying there.
Yeah, I'll come back to you. Man in the back row, yes. On you go, sir.
I'm just looking for a flat at the moment in Glasgow, and there's massive competition to get a flat. And there's all these investment companies that have been set up to buy properties en masse. and you've got to try and compete as an owner-occupier. And I'm wondering if there's some way of a taxation disincentive so it makes it easier for owner-occupiers to get flats.
Paul Sweeney, what do you think?
Well, I think there's a really wicked problem because, like you say, housing pressure costs have gone up 70% in Glasgow in the last year when wages haven't obviously gone up by 70%. So it's really putting a lot of pressure on people in Glasgow. But it's a growth challenge. The city does need to expand. We need to recruit a lot more Glaswegians and make sure we've got the places for them to live. And actually, you made a perfect point. There's enough empty floor space in Glasgow city centre to put 9,000 flats in, already built. We just need to get the right tax incentives in place. So actually, weirdly, to renovate a building to insert flats attracts 20% VAT. To knock it down and build a new build, it's zero rated. There's also a problem with the business rates where if a building's empty, you're actually attracting rates. So there's a situation where the market for these old buildings is actually totally gummed up at the moment. So there's problems in strictures and problems getting planning applications through and permissions granted in a rapid enough way to get this housing mobilised. There's 2,000 empty houses in Glasgow right now. We've got 6,000 homeless people. I mean, you do the maths. They can wipe out a third right away. I know it's simplistic, but it gives you an idea of the sort of big moves we could make. Meanwhile, we're spending millions and millions of pounds paying rents to these big contractors for asylum accommodation, and we even spent recently £500 million renting a cruise ship to sit at Braehead to house some of our Ukrainian refugees. But I think, could we have used that money better for a longer term, more resilient investment? Maybe we could have. It was obviously a short term thing, but there's loads of big moves we make in Glasgow. There's 1,000 football pitches worth of derelict land. We can build out this city and get it back up towards 1 million people again. I think we need to move on that in a big way.
Okay, Annie Wells?
Yeah, I mean, go back to the gentleman's first point as well. Yeah, we are seeing loads of student accommodation. I mean, you can't drive anywhere without seeing it. And I get Susan's point, saying we do have a lot of students in the city, but we're saying half of them are then staying. So where are they getting the accommodation to stay after they leave student accommodation if they're planning to stay here after they graduate? And also as well, it's like, as you know, I've said it often, I live in the Springburn, but we had the Red Road flats at the end of my street. They were bulldozed 10 years ago. We were told after 7 years it would be regenerated. It's a pile of rubble. There's nothing there. That was 4,000 homes that were demolished. And we look at the Site Hill just a wee bit further down. Again, thousands of homes. There's hardly been anything done there. There's hardly been anything built. There's been a school built, a church built, and a few homes that if you've got £300,000 on you go, you can go and buy one. But we've not got anywhere for the people who live in the community to go back to live there, who want to live beside their family. There's nothing there, but we've got all that land up there that we could build homes on, and it's been sitting there for 10 years.
Back to the audience. Man with the white sweater on the end. Yes.
So I think the way that we view housing has to fundamentally change. It's multifaceted. We know that since, Right to Buy, nobody has built enough social and council housing. However, I also wonder, why do people need 2, 3 and 4 homes? Can't we cap the amount of homes that people can have? Why do you need somebody having 2 or 3 homes when they're only living in one and renting the rest of them out at exorbitant rates to people who are paying way over the odds, who can't get a mortgage, but actually if they could get a mortgage, it would be far less than the rent that they're paying? Perhaps we need to stop thinking about housing as a business and think about more of as a right for somewhere to live.
David Eustace, what do you think?
I completely agree with what that gentleman just said. Now, just what that lady was saying there about, the empty properties. I walked up here and I saw the same thing. Now, when I've listened to the panel tonight, I think there's one thing in common. We all want to find solutions. But at the moment, if you're on the streets and you're looking for a home or something, see the facts and figures, it means nothing. What they want is a roof over their head. What they want is some form of safety. What they want is an appreciation that they exist. Now, listen to Willie. Willie's the only one here who I've heard. It's not the politician, but he's the one that's given us an alternative. It's given us a solution. It's given us a pioneering mentality, and I think that's what we really need to embrace. And I think if we do have problems, what I do appreciate you guys are coming from, but if I'm reading this right, it seems to be there's so much red tape and box ticking and lack of decision making. Let him make the decisions.
Is there too much red tape, Willie?
Oh, 100%. But I'd just like to make a point on that, and just the point the gentleman's made. Susan has just said that we've got the most successful delivery of affordable homes, and yet we've declared a housing crisis. That doesn't make sense. No. Right? We've got homeless people, and we've done magic, but they were off and now they're back, the numbers are up again. Here's Paul's point. Glasgow City should not have a housing crisis, and we should not have a deficit. We've got the answers to this problem. Glasgow has a piece of paper from SEPA to say it's got 3,750 hectares of land before it builds in Greenbelt. The Glasgow Strathclyde Pension Fund's got £22 billion in it. We could have a programme tomorrow to get another 150,000 people into Glasgow, in nice houses, solve this problem once for all. And by the way, 100% this is guaranteed. It's time we got on with it.
Yeah. Just quickly.
So this is absolutely right. We have a legacy of post-industrial land in Glasgow that is just waiting to be built on. But there's not a bit of that land doesn't need something done to it first before it can be built on.
Because it's post-industrial.
Because it's undermined, or because it's toxic, or because it needs flood remediation. There's barely a bit of land that you can just go in and build on in Glasgow. And that's why we need a lot more funding to come from both of our governments, but particularly the UK government. What I'm pitching for Glasgow to both of our governments is a devolution deal for Glasgow, a city deal too, that will give us that funding to do what they call its enabling infrastructure, that allow us to go in under the ground, fix the ground, and then allow us to get homes up quickly. This is a legacy of Glasgow's. Glasgow suffered the most brutal deindustrialisation of any city in these islands. We are still living with it. You know, a lot of this sounds really easy, but actually, if you go to communities in Glasgow, there is extraordinary regeneration going on. The change over the past 20 years, you know, on your doorstep, Willie, the work that New Gorbals Housing Association is doing, for example, it's some of the best social rented housing in Europe.
Okay.
But we had the worst social rented housing in Europe 20 years ago.
Fantastic blocks of flats that could house 300 families.
Well, but
that's what Gorbals Housing Association are doing.
But those blocks of flats are no longer compatible with the fire regulations.
They're the nicest flats in the Gorbals.
Post Grenfell.
Nicest flats in the Gorbals.
And Paul's right, we do have lots of empty property, none of which is owned by the City Council. We use more compulsory purchase orders than every other local authority in Scotland put together to get those homes into our ownership. We want to be able to do that more and faster.
All right, Susan,
we've got a strategy for repurposing old offices in the city centre. We want to be able to do that more and faster. And I'd really welcome if Paul... If you spoke to your party in government about that VAT issue, because it's the biggest issue that we've got standing
Paul,
in the way
hang
of
a second.
us.
There are other questions
not a
here
political
tonight.
Issue.
This is
not
let's not into politics this evening.
Facts.
Let's keep this on positive solutions this evening. And there are other questions that people came here with tonight as well, including Audrey Forbes. Where's Audrey this evening? Good evening, Audrey. On you go.
The city centre is becoming more dangerous with gangs of youngsters, making a lot of the public feel unsafe. What can be done to tackle this?
Thank you. Glasgow is the highest crime rate in Scotland. Knife crime here is up. Paul Sweeney, what should we do about that?
Well, we had an incident, you might have seen it, where a building on the south side went on fire, the old Prince and Princess of Wales's hospice. One of my friends was a firefighter that was involved in it, and he said there was every vice you care to imagine going on in that building: prostitution, sexual exploitation of children, a cannabis factory in the basement. This is a function of Glasgow being hollowed out in many ways, where we need to get more people living in it to give that kind of passive surveillance of a community, get community cohesion back again. There's too much of the city centre that is really, desolate after 5 o'clock at night. Huge areas of the city, particularly in the Four Corners, where you see a lot of gathering. There's been sort of anecdotal claims that the free bus pass has allowed people to travel longer distances, young people. Maybe that's contributing to it, social media factors. I don't know if that's true or not. There's been certainly claims that may be the case, but nonetheless, it's about actually a combination of providing more coherent communities in the city centre, get more population in, and also the fact that we've hollowed out so much of our social infrastructure for young people, and there's not many places for kids to socialise anymore because of the cuts to local authorities, where there's been lots of closures of community amenities and community leadership in the city. So I think we need to get back on track with all those things, and hopefully we can make a positive impact on it. A lot of kids, when you actually speak to them about, say, a project I'm doing in Springburn with regeneration, lots of kids want to be involved. They're curious about getting involved in things. They just need the lead. They need a bit of encouragement in the right way, and often they want to get involved in positive things. Otherwise, they're going to turn to more destructive things.
All right, David Eustace, prison officer in Barlinnie, you saw a lot of tough guys back in the day there. Does Glasgow feel safe for you?
I think my comment on anything to do with the prison service would be out of date, to be honest with you, because it's been 30 years. But I think there's elements that carry through. I think that lady, again, makes a really valid point that certain parts of the city don't feel too safe. I don't know if they're any worse than they were in the 60s or 70s that I remember, but that doesn't justify what they are today. I think Paul touched on a point, and the point is the more people you have in the city, then the safer it'll become. And you know, for me, tough guys don't run about with knives. You know, none of the tough guys I met that wasn't running about with knives, so it's a different mindset. I think people have to be, that people are entitled to feel safe in a city, but you know, it happens in every city, but the cities have overcome it, so perhaps we have to look at other cities that did have incredible gang cultures or crime.
Like New York, where you used to live.
Bordeaux, Barcelona. You know, there's cities all over the world
that we can learn from.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to a thing.
We have achieved things in the past with the violence reduction unit. There's been significant improvements over the last years. So we shouldn't beat ourselves up too much. There has been significant.
I don't think it's about beating myself up, but you just, what you've just said to me, you tell that to the person that's going to get tonight.
Do you feel safe in Glasgow? Our audience here tonight, man who's shaking his head with his the glasses. On you go.
I just have one question. Since 2020, violence in schools have risen by a third. And we are heavily relying on our teachers, lecturers, and people of that sort to sort of teach these kids. But these people are also putting themselves in great danger in trying to mitigate this violence. So what support is our teachers going to be getting?
Thank you. And man here.
Yeah, I feel safe in the city, in the city centre. I think the kids in the younger generation are completely bored. They don't see the value of things to do in the community, and that would give the hope that we're greatly lacking.
Willie Haughey, is that man right? I mean, 20 years ago, Glasgow was the murder capital of Europe. We've come a long way from there, actually.
Well, the problem is 20 years ago and 30 years ago, we'd all be talking about Postle, the Gorbals, Drum Chapel, Easterhouse. Going to social media today, and thousands of people are telling you not to let your kids go to St Enoch Square, or Gill Street, Gordon Street. Right, this is the problem that we've got. The four corners you're talking about, Paul. Why don't we stop all these Uber guys from being outside there, make them wait across in the spare ground across the bridge and come over when the orders are ready? People, I was at a wedding 2 weeks ago in Bothwell, and people were telling me they were telling their daughters not to go through the arches at Royal Exchange Square. Right. I mean, unfortunately, this is the truth at the moment, and these are things that can be. This is not about social inclusion. The people that we're talking about that we're getting all the problems are generally hanging about these three quarters and these 3 points on the side.
Let me hear from the audience. Lady in the middle here. Yeah.
Hiya. I work in the prevention of gender-based violence sector, and one thing we have seen is I have spoke to pupils in schools, and there is a problem with violence in general in schools, along with misogyny and sexual harassment and even sexual assault. And I think we need to address the epidemic in young men of why they feel the need to carry knives and act violent and act this way. We need to address the issue at its heart rather than trying to stamp it out at the end of it when it's already happening.
And that doesn't just stay in schools, that then spills out.
It spills on, it grows with the age, and it just builds in the culture.
Thank you. Lady on the front row.
We all know about the 3 corners or the 4 corners where all the trouble is. The police must know. Surely it should be better policed, and, you know, maybe that could be a deterrent, but I just think if we all know about it, surely they must know about it.
Annie Wells, is this a policing issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I don't know how many times I've been in the town or whatever. I don't see any policemen walking about. There's no policemen walking about. We've closed down local police stations as well, so you can't go in and report a crime anymore. And I do think we all know where all the trouble starts and where it all is. And I think schools is a place that we absolutely need to look at. But we can't just leave it on to the schools and teachers. Parents have got to take responsibility as well. And as with communities need to step in there and give youngsters something to do. Paul's doing a regeneration project in Springburn. Why are we not creating this community pride? I'll say it again. Because when I was growing up, I had places I could go. I had things I could get involved in. It didn't cost a lot of money to do it. But I don't see that happening anymore. Even if you go up to Springburn Park, there's crowds hanging about. I wouldn't even go up there during the day to walk my dog or take my grandkids up. So I think we need to see more police on the beat.
Susan
Absolutely.
Aitken, do you feel safe walking round the city centre in an evening? Do you feel safe?
I do feel safe, and you know, I'm in all over the city all the time. But I suppose I've got the advantage of I'm in regular contact with Police Scotland. I can't speak for them, but I'm in regular contact with them. And I think the word feel is a really, really important part. Crime in the city centre hasn't actually gone up. Antisocial behaviour has gone up a wee bit. And that is something that the police are saying, that they're looking at their techniques for dealing with that and how they police antisocial behaviour. And it is primarily young people. The tragedy is that it appears that young people are, or some young people are maybe a bit more at risk from each other just now. And the couple of tragedies that we've seen in recent weeks I don't believe that that's endemic. I don't believe it's an epidemic among young people, but there is something, I think we need to have a bit of empathy here. That generation were hit really hard by COVID and the lockdown. They went through a period where they lost a lot of their childhood and their time as young people, where you learn how to...
We're not saying that excuses carrying a knife or getting involved in violence.
I'm not saying it excuses it, but I also think we need to understand the context. No, there's no excuse for carrying a knife, but we need to understand the context that a lot of these young folk are coming from. Coming out of that period 20 years ago, when the Violence Reduction Unit was established, what was put in place in Scotland then was something called public health policing, an approach that tries to understand the background that young people are coming from, not go soft on them, make sure it's properly policed, but understand that you're not going to change the culture without understanding where it comes from.
Is Glasgow safe in the city centre? What do you think?
There's obviously people out there telling you not to go to these places. So people, it doesn't matter what me and Susan think, right? The vast majority of people who are using the city centre say that it's not safe to go to certain places at night, right? Plenty of people on social media are telling you not to go. So people are all nodding. Susan saying no, so I think we'll go with what the audience think. But I would say to you that these are all fixable. What's happening is we're tolerating it. See, we shouldn't be, we're resilient, but we're putting up with things that we'd never put up with in the past, right? And we need to help our voices to be heard so people do something about it, because this place has still got the chance to flourish, but it's time that we need to kind of take back control and tell people we're not taking it anymore.
Crikey, take back control. Where have we heard that before? Lady in the back row, yes.
I have to disagree with Susan, I'm afraid. Whether it's crime or whether it's antisocial behaviour, the impact is the same. People aren't feeling safe going into the city centre, lack of police presence, and also the lack of safe transport home in the evening. The subways are shut on a Sunday, the trains are cancelled, and buses are unreliable, and we don't even get started on taxis. That's ultimately what the issue is. You can label it however you want, but the feeling is the same.
OK, thank you, thank you. Your views from home, hashtag is BBCDN on social media. We haven't really talked about health this evening, and we've just got time for one more question, which comes from Paul Smith. Paul, good evening.
Good evening, panel. So, Glasgow men are living 7 years less than the UK average. How do we address this shocking statistic?
Thank you, Paul. And it's not just men either. Glasgow is the lowest female life expectancy in the UK. Annie Wells.
I think it's a terrible indictment to have in Glasgow, and I think what we need to do is we need to start looking at how do we encourage people to get healthier in a way? How do we stop the deprivation that we're seeing in the city? How do we actually make sure that people have got how do we make sure people have got the means to do what they need to do to live longer? We need to make sure that the houses are proper as well, because some of the houses are full of mould and they're full of dampness.
We've talked about housing, what else?
Yes, but I'm saying this is still part of it as well. It still affects how people live their lives. And I think we need to look at even just getting appointments with doctors and stuff like that. I mean, I've waited 5 weeks to get my mum a GP appointment, and then you wait 6 months to get another appointment. That isn't going to help with people's life expectancy.
But by that time, you're already ill. So what about getting ahead of this?
Yeah, oh, right. Well, as I said, look at the health, education, look at nutrition. How do we encourage people to actually cook for themselves? Can we organise community cooking events? Can we look at more allotments in the city? Can we look at how do we actually encourage people to exercise? I won't exercise in a park about where I live because it's covered in glass bottles, it's covered in needles, or it's covered in dog faeces as well. So we need to encourage people. We need to put, I mean, some of the parks, Rock Hill Parks, get an outside exercise place in it. I go there when I'm working at Maryhill, but I'm not going to travel from Springburn to there to just do that.
So more things like that.
More things like that as well, yeah. But I think the housing conditions as well doesn't help with people's health.
Okay,
I think
David Eustace.
It's really important there. Everything that Annie touched on there comes back to education. It comes back to I don't believe there's a single parent, or I hope there's not many parents, who wish to feed their children junk. They don't really realise a lot of it, so people just try their best for it. And it's not necessarily about wealth as such, because you can make a substantial meal out of basic stuff. But sometimes I think it's really a lack of education, that we need to get prevention rather than cure. You know, and again, we've got to look at that ourselves. Are we walking a little bit enough? Well, I think we are in the city. We're trying to do things with bike lanes. We live in a city that is only a short distance from some of the most beautiful countryside in the world. Many of us over a certain age get free bus passes. I don't know how the younger ones work with, but I think they get free travel to a certain extent. It's never been easier to get to the country. It's never been easier to get healthy. It's never been easier to get a form of education. But I do think we need to try and get home to people who do value their health, who do value their children's health, that it can start at home as well, you know?
This is the root of everything, Willie Haughey, isn't it? And it's a problem that Glasgow's had for a long time. What do we do about it?
Yeah, well, it'd be difficult to try and go back and change our stable diet. But I think that you're right. I think there's all sorts of parts, ingredient parts, that get to these unbelievable statistics, right? That no way should we live in a city where your life expectancy is 9 years less than the rest of the country, and for women it's 7 years, I believe. But I think that one of the big things I think that people's mental health now has deteriorated more than ever, and that's all down to, again, worrying about the cost of living crisis. There's no many people. Glasgow smells better. I don't see a lot of people smiling. Right, I think we need to do more and more things to try and get people to be a wee bit more upbeat, and I think we need to do what we need to do. Housing, education, 100%, David, is a big, big part of it, but it's a terrible label, terrible.
Let me hear from the audience. Man with the glasses, here.
Again, I agree with Annie. It comes down to, like, say, housing and people's diets. They can't afford. They tell you to eat healthily, but you go to eat healthily, you can't afford it. It's too expensive. And they've done away with all the, like, say, sports fields and things like that. There's none of them in Glasgow for the youngsters to go.
Thank you. Man on the front row here.
I cook everything from scratch. I do not buy processed food. All my friends will buy packet food from various supermarkets. Everything gets done from the basic ingredients. I'm self-taught. I'm not a chef by any stretch of the imagination. My mother suffered from rheumatoid arthritis and was crippled, so I became chief cook and bottle washer at 14. And I learnt how to cook, and that is the biggest mistake I see every day. Just Eat turning up with breakfast, lunch or dinner.
I should say,
breakfast.
Deliveroo is also available.
Deliveroo and other establishments are available, but it's an education. And for somebody to say that to eat healthier is too expensive, it's not too expensive if you do it right.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And Paul, you asked the question.
Yeah, so just to go back to the talking about the healthy eating. So the government in Westminster had a plan to come out with a programme about ultra-processed food, and then they pulled the plug on it due to pressure from ultra-processed food manufacturers. And that is the big issue. Is some of the stuff that we're putting into our bodies these days is just shocking. Yeah. And most people, as education, they don't know. It's convenience. It's changed. When I was younger, my mother cooked every night. I could tell you probably what we had every night because it was always Tuesday this,
Wednesday night. What would it be on a Wednesday?
Yeah, but it was always cooked fresh, you know. So it goes back to education and maybe teaching, because do we even do home economics in school anymore?
Yeah. Paul Sweeney, I mean, is this about personal responsibility? Is this about legislation?
Part of it is about food culture. I was one of the few boys in my school that did home economics at standard grade, just because I got on well with the teacher. But
what grade did you get?
I think I got a 1. I think I got a 1, so I didn't do too bad. I didn't burn too many things in the kitchen. But I think you're right. There is a lack of education and food culture, but that doesn't explain the inequalities in Glasgow, because that's a national issue. And you're right about the regulation needs. But you know, Glasgow, the so-called Glasgow effect. Why do people die younger in Glasgow, unlike any other British city, even equivalent cities that have had the same shocks like Liverpool, Manchester? The reality is it goes back to our history. The city's more hollowed out than any other British city. The poor areas are very, very poor, and the richer areas are very relatively richer. And that polarisation is the issue. So we need to reinflate Glasgow and rebalance the population and demographics. That gives more agency. The common issues that you said, people are more likely to, you know, have the agency to report things in the parks, get things fixed, take the agency to fix the community up, and it lifts everyone up. That's the thing that Glasgow's lacking. But also, I also make the point that austerity's had a huge effect. The cuts to the city, the disproportionate effect on funding for things like local communities. Also, one of the key points I think is important to mention is access to healthcare is a key issue. I met a lady at the Marie Curie Hospice in Stobhill Hospital, and she said that because she couldn't get access to her GP in Bridgeton, because she was fobbed off, she was there dying of a terminal illness, terminal throat cancer, because she didn't get timely access to her GP because she was fobbed off. I think that's a national scandal. That's the Glasgow effect writ larger. Someone in their 40s dying of a terminal illness when they could have been treated.
Susan Aitken, a long-term problem for Glasgow. What do we do about it?
So I think it's not just the life expectancy in and of itself. It is that gap in life expectancy, the inequality. Actually, if you're relatively affluent, doing okay in Glasgow, you will broadly do okay. There is a direct link to poverty. No one's entirely sure what the cause of that Glasgow effect is. There's been a huge amount of research done into it. There is something about having the lack of a sense of control over your life, of stress. Stress is a killer, and poverty is one of the most stressful things that a person can experience.
So poverty is the key. Getting to the bottom of poverty is the key to this.
And breaking those cycles of poverty that we've had in Glasgow for generations, and giving people a sense of control over their own lives, control over their own destinies. If you don't know whether you're going to be able to put decent food on the table for your kids at the end of the day when they come from school, that's an incredibly stressful experience. And sometimes it's a lot cheaper to buy that ultra-processed, cheap food and feed your kids and fill their bellies.
Unfortunately, we've spent an hour on this evening and we've only scratched the surface. But I hope we've come up with some solutions and some positivity and some ideas about this as well. Thank you very much indeed for being with us tonight. Next week, we're going to be in Edinburgh, in Portobello, by the seaside. Have a look at the website if you want to come along and join us. If you missed any of tonight's show, we're repeated at 10:40 tonight on BBC One Scotland, or you can watch it any time that suits you on the iPlayer. Thank you very much indeed to my panel here tonight and to a great audience in Glasgow City Centre, and to you at home for watching wherever you happen to be. We'll see you next week in Edinburgh. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well. From all of us in Debate Night, good night.